A Swedish journalist visited a no-go zone in Trollhättan after riots that had taken place there a few days prior, where upwards of 40 people attacked police with fireworks and set cars on fire. When journalist Joachim Lamotte showed up in this migrant neighborhood, 50 people were waiting for him, threatening him, throwing fireworks, and trying to snatch his phone away from him. He was beaten and robbed of his equipment right in front of police, who were afraid to escalate the situation.
50 pers som attackerade mig när jag kom hit. Jag kastade bangers, jag fick ta emot ett par smällar. Polisen fick ta emot ett par smällar. De ville att jag ska lämna det stället för de säger att det är deras område.
According to Lamotte, the migrant mob completely ignored the police, referred to them as Swede whores, and even made threats towards them. As more and more people started gathering, the situation got increasingly aggressive, and backup eventually arrived, at which point Lamotte was escorted safely out of the neighborhood. Since then, his videos have been blowing up on social media here in Sweden, but no headlines or word from a mainstream media whatsoever. In fact, the only attention that they've been giving him is ridicule. Right after the journalist was beaten and robbed, a boss at the city's local municipality posted a satire video on Facebook mocking him. The video shows her recording empty space and pretend freaking out over a riot taking place, which is pretty messed up, as just a few days prior people had their cars set on fire and police were pelted with fireworks. But she didn't lose her job, of course. The municipality explains that they still have full confidence in her, quote-unquote. Which might explain how these problems take place to begin with, because if this is the kind of people that are in charge of the city, why would anything work out? And this type of incompetence really does reflect our greater mainstream as a whole. After this attack, the political secretary of Sweden's biggest union, as well as the former press secretary of the Social Democrats, went out on Twitter and said that he feels more sympathy for the migrant gang of criminals than he does for the abused journalist. And so many leading journalists have decided to bully Lamotte on Twitter and make him feel stupid for what happened, with many support likes from politicians, media editors, and other establishment figures. One mainstream journalist said he just can't stop giggling at the aggravated assault and robbery. Because before Lamotte visited the ghetto, he wrote a time-setting post on Facebook, in case he wouldn't make it out in one piece, since he had already been threatened before he even traveled there. So leading journalists, known for taking a stance against online harassment, bullying, and hate, started a hashtag specifically to mock him over this goodbye letter, to make him feel pathetic and alarmist. All for thinking he was going to be hurt in a migrant ghetto that they would never travel to on their own accord, by the way, because this is always the pattern with the progressive elites. They're overcompensating. All of their ideals are just image. Only 1% of Swedish parliament candidates are from the hood. And over 50% of Swedish journalists live in our metrosexual white capital of Stockholm. The Swedish establishment has no real experience with the virtues that they are preaching. They don't live multiculturally themselves, and they don't act tolerant in practice. They just expect it from everyone else. And Sweden ends up being segregated. Videos like these explain why our Swedish media are scared to go to the ghetto, why they never go there. Because when they do, stuff like this happens. And everyone can see that the problems denied actually exist. And our politicians aren't any better. Let me quote an immigrant who jumped ship from the Liberal Party to a more conservative party. Quote, "I felt like an exotic decoration, simply there to fill a diversity quota. When my party is too afraid to even go to these immigrant neighborhoods to put up election posters. I can't stand for that. I see other parties applauding multiculturalism but being afraid to live amongst us immigrants. I just want them to actually live up to their own ideas. I just want them to have the same demands on themselves that they have on me." Yeah, that pretty much parallels my experience with socialists as an immigrant too. I just wish that more people would study psychology and learn what projection is, because then they wouldn't listen as much to creepy politicians or lazy media. They are essentially just making a list of their own sins and then pinning that on their right-wing opponents. Or white men in general. I'm looking at the Swedish establishment here, and all I can think is, you're acting like a bunch of Russian bots here. Okay? Your society is crumbling, yet somehow you're celebrating? Whose side are you on here? Because when cops and journalists get attacked by drug-dealing gangs, you're not supposed to be happy. and celebrate. Recently, I read an article about how a 60-year-old guest at a hotel was beaten to death during a robbery gone wrong by what a witness described as, quote, "free little guys." I'm living in a country where boys are raping, robbing, and murdering people. Do you realize how insane that sounds? And I'm reading all this right after 2 highly publicized civilian fatalities. A mother was shot holding her child, and a 15-year-old bystander was killed after a gang shooting. The migrant neighborhood Lamotte visited is deemed so unsafe that not even security guards are allowed there anymore. And just after the big riot in Trollhättan, there was yet another one in Vänersborg, where a group consisting of 30 little guys completely smashed a convenience store and then pelted police with rocks and fireworks when they arrived. So what exactly are you laughing at? Because all this journalist ever did was what you're afraid to do. Travel to these neighborhoods and ask normal people what they think and feel about the issues that they're affected by. Something you've been afraid to do for so many years, as the problems just kept growing and growing. Anyone's allowed to approach the mic and speak their mind when Lamotte is broadcasting. He's not trying to over-edit or be biased in any way there. So when you find it funny that a journalist got beaten up trying to ask normal people what they think about these issues, it really comes off like you couldn't give a shit less about these normal people. Because it's not exactly fun to be living in one of the problem areas that you, the establishment, created. This left-wing academic got an award called Online Angel of the Year for improving the social tone on the internet and making sure there's less hate and bullying. She was even given 50,000 crowns for this great achievement. And yeah, of course she joined in on a mockery against the battered journalist. Our democracy situation is so bad here that even the British BBC contacted Joachim Lamotte for an interview, while no Swedish mainstream journalist is interested in his story.
He says youths frequently insult, intimidate and even attack police. Police spokesman denied a report in a local newspaper that officers were ceasing patrols for their own safety. That's not the way Swedish journalists like to portray the country, and where official statistics show that nearly 1 in 4 people was born outside the country or has 2 foreign parents.
After this interview, the BBC producer actually apologized to Lamotte personally for the incompetence and cowardice of his Swedish counterparts, who aren't really capable of being honest about our situation, nor very empathic. Unlike any Swedish journalist, Lamotte says that the British ones actually took time to offer condolences, and it's just crazy to think, should you really have to travel abroad to face a little empathy? Do you have any idea how bad things are in my country if the British state media is coming across as woke? Because it's not like the British media never covered up anything. Point being, if you have to go to foreign media to find out what's happening in your own country, maybe you're getting dangerously close to China. Of course, this isn't the only thing that Swedish journalists have kept silent on over the years. My entire channel is like a library of their mistakes and biases. Here's an exceptionally bad recent case that the Swedish mainstream completely blacked out. I haven't seen anyone comment on this, other than a few alternative medias here and there trying to raise awareness. The images are too gruesome for me to be able to show them to you in this video, but in short, this is what happened. A young Swedish couple were put through brutal torture and attempted decapitation, all because the girl reported an immigrant for rape. His friend decided to attack the couple, and the full story is actually quite crazy, so look in the video description for a link to my website if you want to read the whole thing. But to sum it up, this is insanity parallel to a horror movie. Yet you won't find a word about it in the mainstream because the ethnicity of the victims ruins their narrative. And this is the kind of mainstream media bias that fuels radicalization. When a large part of the population is made to feel invisible by someone else's political agenda. How can you not report on something as vicious as this? Obviously, all humans are worth the same, and this would have been beyond horrible had it happened to a couple of refugees. It's equally horrible when it happens to whites. So why don't you, the media, just treat us all the same? Well, why is that too much to ask of you? Now, on a different note, my audience sometimes tells me that I'm a curmudgeon with no real solutions to offer. I just focus on the negative. Well, Thanks to YouTube's juicy recommendations, I think I've actually discovered a pretty good solution to a lot of Sweden's problems. If you really want to prevent young people from getting into trouble with the law, why don't you just take America's lead and offer something like this?
Ice mother Mike. I hate seeing you young bitches come up in here trying to be tough. And what's your problem? You want to fight? Yeah. Oh, you like fighting? Here, hold this. This Kool-Aid. We put this on bitches like you. You gonna be my bitch. And take your finger, just do this to the bottom one. Come here. I kiss you. Orange flavor mother. And it ain't personal with you either because you white.
Ha! That'll probably scare him away from prison. See, now he has something substantial to associate prison with, instead of it just being a vague idea in his mind that only becomes real after you messed up.
Orange flavor mother.
Of course, Sweden would never do this though, because then you would notice the overrepresentation on camera, so to speak. Seriously though, when you watch this TV show Scared Straight, it becomes real obvious that a lot of prisoners are happy to keep other people from choosing the same route in life as they did. And you see it working on these kids too.
Brian has been more responsible.
Before the jail visit, I was headed in jail. After the jail visit, I'm headed to college.
It sure seems to work a lot better than what the Swedish police are doing, which is to offer these young rioters pizza and coffee. Maybe peace-damaged progressive Swedes should listen more to those dirty brutes who actually have some experience, instead of just yapping about socioeconomical factors. Young adults caught up in crime need a strong male voice to give them a reality check, instead of too much coddling and a victim narrative that really just gives you a social license to keep being an outlaw. But that's just a thought from your friendly neighborhood foreigner. Until next time, please share this video, because Swedes certainly won't. Namaste!